Wars are no longer fought only with soldiers and missiles. According to global finance historian Adam Tooze, the real power of the modern world lies in who controls money, payments, and trust. And right now, that power is under challenge. Behind closed doors, away from election headlines and breaking news, a silent financial war is unfolding. Not over land, but over currencies. Not over borders, but over who controls the world's money. At the center of this conflict stand two forces: the Western-led financial system, and a rising coalition known as Brics. What happens next could redefine global power for decades. If you're trying to understand the hidden forces shaping your future, not just the headlines, this channel exists for that reason. Subscribe now, because what we uncover here doesn't stay visible for long. For nearly 80 years, the global financial system has revolved around one currency, the US dollar. Former Federal Reserve Chairman Paul Volcker once admitted, the dollar's role is not just economic, it is geopolitical. Control the reserve currency, and you control trade, debt, and sanctions. Western institutions like the IMF and World Bank became the referees of global finance. Their loans rebuilt nations, but also shaped policies, currencies, and governments. Economist Joseph Stiglitz later warned that these institutions often exported Western priorities, not neutrality. For decades there was no alternative, until cracks began to show. Brics began as a Wall Street term, coined by Goldman Sachs economist Jim O'Neill to describe fast-growing economies. But what started as a label evolved into a coalition. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Together, they represent over 40% of the world's population and a growing share of global production. Chinese economist Yu Yongding describes Brics not as an alliance, but as a shared frustration with a system they didn't design. These countries didn't just want influence. They wanted options. The turning point came when finance itself became a weapon. Sanctions, once rare, became routine. Former U.S. Treasury official Juan Zarate openly stated, "Financial pressure is now one of America's most powerful tools." But power cuts both ways. Russian central bank officials later admitted that sanctions exposed a dangerous truth. If your reserves are in someone else's currency, they are not really yours. For Brics nations, this wasn't theoretical. It was existential. Pause for a moment, because this is where the story changes. If this is the kind of deep financial mystery you want more of, tap like. It tells the algorithm this conversation matters. So, Brics began doing something radical. They started trading without the dollar. Energy deals in yuan. Bilateral trade in local currencies. And plans for alternatives to SWIFT, the Western-controlled payment network. Economist Zoltan Pozsar calls this shift the quiet end of dollar complacency. Brics also launched their own financial tools. A development bank, reserve arrangements, and discussions of shared settlement systems. This wasn't rebellion. It was insurance. Western leaders insist the dollar remains dominant. And they're right for now. But IMF analysts have acknowledged that the dollar's share of global reserves has slowly declined. Former ECB President Christine Lagarde warned, reserve currencies do not last forever. The concern isn't collapse. It's fragmentation. A world where money flows through competing systems, beyond Western control. This financial war isn't about ideology. It's about leverage. Emerging economies want freedom from external shocks. Western nations want stability and influence. Development economist Ha-Joon Chang puts it bluntly. The rules of global finance were written by the winners of history. Others are now rewriting them. For everyday people, this affects inflation, trade prices, debt, and growth. Here's the question most people avoid. Do you think the dollar will remain dominant, or are we witnessing the birth of a multipolar money system? Leave your answer in the comments. I read every perspective. Some analysts predict a multipolar financial world, where no single currency dominates. Others warn fragmentation could increase volatility. Former Bank of England Governor Mark Carney describes the moment as the most fragile financial transition since Bretton Woods. This isn't the end of the dollar, but it may be the end of dollar monopoly. History shows that empires rarely fall overnight. They erode, slowly, quietly, through systems once thought permanent. The financial war between Brics and the West is not about who wins tomorrow. It's about who writes the rules for the next generation. And in the shadows of money and power, the future is already being decided. This financial war won't end with Brics or the West. It will continue through digital currencies, debt crises, and silent policy shifts. The next chapter is already unfolding, and it's far more dangerous than most people realize. Subscribe and watch the next episode, where we uncover how digital money could become the ultimate weapon in global finance.